So welcome to the Node.js Node API team meeting for August 19th, 2022. We will follow our typical approach of looking at what's tagged for milestone 11 and go from there. So let me just pull that up and share JS. Okay, now where's the share button? Okay, so the first one is adding a list of non-C language bindings to Node. I know that we had some discussion of that and Nick is working on it, but we probably don't have an update for this week. Unless anybody else has something to add.
No, let's move on.
Okay, next one, better coverage of Node API in YouTube. I think Nick mentioned he was also working on that, but he's out as well, so probably no update on that one either. Drive for full coverage. I know, Jack, you've been taking a look at that and we're going to work on some stuff.
Yep. So I had to open a small PR on Node add-on API for one of the missing functionalities, but I wasn't sure if it was like the best way to test it. It's like a small change, but
That's this one.
Yep. This is testing the ref class method under thread state functions, and yeah, I'm not sure if this is the best way to do it.
So is it
like it's just literally like a one-line change, but
right, so we're reffing something, I guess. The question is, does that actually test what that's trying to validate?
Yeah,
like I guess it tests that we can call the method.
Yeah. Like this, I think this function uses the libuv method, like uv ref underneath. But I was like, I guess my question was like, what will be some kind of scenarios where we kind of use this? I guess.
Right. So let's just take a. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts. I'm just gonna take a look at the ref method itself, just to see, like you said, what it's doing. I guess it's TSFN. Colon ref, maybe? No. You know about where about the line is?
I think it's like pipe thread state functions.
Sorry, it's type thread state function. Colon ref? No, it's not finding anything.
Oh, it's under line, I think 5,000, like 5715.
Sorry, 57.
Yeah, 5715.
Okay, 5715.
Oh, sorry. I think it's yeah, that one.
Right. Okay. So then, if we look at no. Okay. Right. Right. So I guess that there is also the question of like, this is pretty much just a wrapper.
Yeah.
So in some case, it comes down to like, is that already tested? If the backing thing is already tested, does it really make sense to make complicated? Like this one is probably going to be a pretty complicated test to test the full, like, does the event loop get, kept alive or not kept alive?
Yeah.
I guess like whenever let's say function get destroyed, it should call some kind of callback. I think like a test may actually just simply see like if we ref it a few times and ref a few times, and at some point we do we see this call to our callback that function been destroyed.
I guess
Right, because
it's
I
not
guess at least
possible
calling
since-
the unref is, yeah, good point.
I'm wondering, it's hard to determine if the loop is still alive without APIs directly using the UV API. Since we cannot assert the loop is going to live forever.
Yeah, let's see. I don't think we necessarily, like, that doesn't look to me like we have a test
Yeah.
in the C side of things. But I think as Lijiang says, you said it's very hard to test, right?
Yeah,
I think
we have to.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I mean, unless we have access to the UV APIs, then we have no way to verify it with a deterministic way.
I think if anything, a test would be better on the C level integrated with Node versus in the wrapper. Does that make sense to people?
So like from a node core, we use the UV API to get the event loop handle and check if it's alive after that.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm thinking, like, because it doesn't look like we have a test. If we were to add a test, it would probably be better in the core side, because it would give us broader testing. And then on that assumption, I think because of the sort of complication of repeating that, especially without having in core, you'd have the better ability to reach into like UV and whatever.
Right.
And on that assumption, then the test in our test coverage suite can probably be lighter.
Right.
But I think Vladimir, you were maybe suggesting that we should probably have like a ref and unref equivalent. Like if we did a ref and an unref, then at least we get something like, that tells us either we haven't implemented either of them and they're both doing nothing. Or if you did one of them, but not the other one, that might help you catch that, right?
I think, yeah, sorry, I think I was just adding on to one of the tests that Kevin wrote was like for testing onRef, which is easier since I think once you onRef, it just exits from the event loop. But like his does this set timeout callback and then onRefs it. So my thought process was literally like, if it doesn't make a difference, then I just ref the call and then the later is on like onRefs it, and then that just does nothing really, and then shouldn't really affect it.
Yeah, but
Okay, so we already have this test to unref.
Yeah.
But if we added a ref, shouldn't that break the unref one?
I think ref is like idempotent. So like if you like once it's ref, like it doesn't actually really do anything once you ref it
Right.
again.
Okay. Got it. I mean, the other thing too is maybe this is already a test that said if you put a ref in, like, because it's interesting, like the unref, you'd think that the original, like unref only makes sense if you've refed it, or is it that the default is that it's unref, is that it's refed?
By default, it's refed when creating a new UV handle. Yeah. So we can, like, say, ref it once and unref it twice. So can verify it unref. It's
right.
ultimately unrefing the. But I'm not. I suppose we didn't have a ref counter on this. I'm not sure. Maybe we need to check that.
Yeah, it's like, is it a right? Because if there's a ref counter, then refing it twice should actually break the test, right?
right, like for example, just inserting this ref sounds to me it's supposed like the test's supposed to fail, right? Like because it would never be unrefed. It's unbalanced in this case.
Right. Now we could look in. There is a unref.
Yeah, both these functions do not return ref count, so technically it's not possible for us to test if these functions, even on C side, do anything.
I just checked that UV doesn't have a ref counter. It's just a flag if it's a refed or if it's unrefed. So it's a, we don't, it's just a simple flag.
Right. Okay. So, but I think the unref test. Now yeah. Like basically the unref test, or sorry, the test for ref then could be that we unref and then we ref, and this test should effectively fail.
We cannot test the failure since the process is going to live forever if we are not going to kill it.
Oh yeah.
Right, although it says there's some sort of timeout here. Is that?
Yep, that's where I think Kevin wrote the onRef.
Because it must be expecting that because it's unrefed, it will finish within some timeout, right? Is that so?
Yeah, on the JavaScript side of things, I think it spawns a child process, and then if I think it also sets a timer. If
Right.
Yeah, like I think if by the time the timer reaches end and then the child's still alive, it's saying, okay, this something is like it's not supposed to happen.
Right. Okay. So maybe we're just. What is it? So this timeout here is this?
I think this is just fetched from like the VA, I think.
I guess maybe it's keeping the TFSN alive for a certain amount of time or something.
Yeah.
think if we're not using the true ref count, we can break in contract of our API. That's would be my expectation.
Right. So here,
If we say if we have functions ref and unref, they're really supposed to be using the ref counter. If we don't, then this test clearly shows we can break in expectation.
Yeah, but yeah, it's just a API that mimicking the UV's handle ref. So the naming is coming from the UV ref and unref.
But can you call like them multiple times? Like, can you call 2 times ref?
Yeah, but it's just non-meaningless since when you call UV ref, the flag is set to ref, and you call it twice, the flag is still refed. And you call unref, the flag is set to unrefed. It's just a bit flag. It's not reference counting.
But do you think it's correct behavior?
I think it's the question could be, did we use the right name? But
yeah,
the answer might be wrong, but I that's something like, yeah, if we thought about it earlier, but this, I don't think it's worth renaming it.
All right.
Right. I think
it's more or less marking the handle if the handle is alive, or I'm not sure. Maybe. Sorry.
so. I think our original question was like, this actually tests that the unref allows the event loop to end, right? Like, it seems to start another process. If that other process doesn't stop running, then it will fail, right?
Yeah, I think from my like playing around with this file, like if it like it succeeds, it's gonna resolve this promise and it never like executes the timeout.
Right. So, but so what, like an actual test of the unref of the ref could end up meaning that, like, we've unrefed it and we've got the unref test that says, okay, unref works. So if we unref it, we know that it should not hang. If we now add a test where we unref then ref, it should hang. And so this timeout actually should, after whatever the timeout is, it should still be hung. And if it's not, like if it's actually terminated, then we know the unref didn't work. So I guess, I'm thinking like taking this test and adjusting it, you can probably come up with a test that actually looks for the hang instead of looking for it to not hang.
Okay, I see.
So kind of like, does that make sense?
I think, sorry, so in that case, would it be just the same as like if we do not release a TSFN? Because like I think if we don't release it, it'll just keep running, right? Because then ref doesn't really do anything because it just the default state is ref.
As long as that keeps the event loop alive.
Okay.
Right. Like it's the unref would say, okay, if the only thing running is the TFSN, node should terminate.
All right.
And the flip side would, the thing we're trying to test is if you actually say unref, but then change your mind and say ref, then if the only thing that's running is the TFSN, it shouldn't terminate.
Okay.
So like we could run the same code, except that if the timeout, it's basically like if we hit the timeout, that's the success case versus if we don't hit it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And then in the C code, right after we unref it, we ref it, right? And
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Okay.
I think,
And Vladimir, back to your point, like I take your point that ref and unref, that's not going to be the expectation necessarily. The question is like how important it would be to do something about that. Because we don't want to, like every time we can't really remove them because we basically said it's going to be, especially in the C side, we've got things called ref and unref, and we basically said we're not going to break that ABI.
Right, but we can change the implementation to actually use actual ref counting underneath.
But I don't, that's like just adding functionality because we named it wrong in the first place, right? Like, I don't think we ever said we needed to be a ref count. It was just a way to say you could, like, it was exposing the libuv ability to ref, to keep it alive or not keep it alive. So it's like, do we really need a ref count? If the answer was, if we think yes, then sure. But I'm not sure it's worth like adding functionality just because of with the naming we used.
Okay, I don't know that much about this this function, this type, but yeah, just in general feels wrong. Sorry.
The typical
Yeah.
use case for the ref and unref is when creating the handle and just unref it, so that we don't need, which means we don't need to keep the process alive just for this handle. So I'm not sure it's worth it to. I'm not sure without more significant use cases for this. I don't think we need to add new API for it.
Yeah, that's where I would be sort of starting, but let's see this API doc. I think the simple thing that could be done is like, does it make any sense to add to this doc to clarify? Like this basically says similar to libuv handles, but it could make it clear that like this is not a normal ref count. Like it's either you're either refed or you're unrefed. There's no counting going on. Like so that's easy to do and may add some value. I don't know, Vladimir, if you think that's any use.
Yeah, at least clarifying in documentation until we decide if we want to change it. I agree. Like, yeah, makes sense.
Okay, so that's something I'll add to my list because I could do that pretty easily, and I can see that then there's some value in removing that potential confusion. Where is so?
Because there is even the whole paragraph was just below about reference counting functions. If it explains, could we scroll down a little bit? Down. I believe I saw something. Oh, strange. With some kind of reference. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, but that's something where I can pretty easily add some things in just to say.
Yeah, this one like reference counting. See, like a section is different.
Right. Yeah. So reference counting. Okay.
Oh, it's different from type safe. is sorry.
Well, I think it's more about when the thread safe function itself, like whether it stays alive or not. Right, like, because you can have multiple people who are consuming a thread safe function, and I think you can acquire it. So like if 3 people acquire that thread safe function, they all acquire it, and then when you release it, there is a reference count going on there. So that determines whether the thread safe function is alive or not. But this unreffing of the thread safe function is like, does it keep node alive or not? So if assuming that the thread safe function is still alive, then have you basically said that it should keep node alive or not?
I see. Wow.
Yeah, no, I see. So that's even more confusing. Because you've got this, yeah.
I need to learn more about it.
Yeah, okay. I think
People
some
never
additional clarification there, just a few words might help to say, yes, we understand this is potentially confusing, but this is.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to go back to the issues. Anything else, Jack, on that front?
I think that should be it. But I think, sorry, just one more thing. And
Yeah.
there's a few overloads for the thread safe function. I haven't taken like a deeper look at it, but how do we test all those different overloads effectively? I think this goes for like thread workers as well, like async workers.
Okay, so let me just that. So what do you have a line number for, like an example of?
Yeah, like around here. I think just in general, like type thread safe function has a few like overloads, quite a few overloads. I'm not sure like how do we test all of them effectively?
Right. And in terms of those overloads, they take different types, or do they allow you to have less types with defaults, or?
I believe there will be defaults, but like especially like the new parameter, like when you
Right.
yeah.
You mean like here with the different templates, or maybe there's.
Yeah, I guess different templates then, yeah. Yeah, like these different configs of like different things missing and different things that it's requiring. Different
Right.
overloads, yeah.
I don't know. Do other people have like? What do people see mostly tests do to test those? I suspect, I don't know, like we could have tests that basically, like, for the defaults, make sure the default is as expected.
Hmm.
In terms of the templates, I don't think we need to test all different like in a lot of cases, the templates are just like meant to be so you can come up with your own thing as opposed to us predetermining them, right? So
yeah, I guess usually then we have a template and we must test it. We usually come up with some custom types or custom, like for example, if we need to have a function pointer as a function template, it's just some kind of static function that you have inside of test you can pass in. I guess the same can be done for other parameters.
but we only need to really do that once, right? Like, I guess
Right.
you know, one of the questions might be, do you need like 10 different things to test a whole bunch of combinations, or is doing one thing that matches the template typically enough?
I would say we start with one.
Yeah, yeah.
To me, it does not make sense to do like all possible combinations. Unless we'll discover there's some special cases, especially around some, say, custom struct versus, say, somebody using like some primitive type, like integer or something.
Okay.
Yeah. It is an interesting from like the coverage point, because often we might have like we might have one which has less parameters, but then calls the one that has all the parameters, right? So if you just write a test that does the one with all the parameters, it's going to tell you the other one's uncovered.
Well, is there many overloads of this new method?
I think there's a few, and I think the scenario goes for other functions as well, like async workers and a bunch where there's different configurations that we can provide.
So I suspect the templates wouldn't affect coverage, but definitely if we have multiple versions of the, like here's maybe an example: static getter, callback, static setter, callback.
Yeah, we probably want to have one test per each overload, at least.
Right. Yeah. Right, because that would affect coverage otherwise.
At least in Microsoft Visual C++ compiler, what I found when I'm doing a template-based development, if I don't write a test for method, in fact, this method may not even compile. Somebody
right, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's a good
people
point.
see stuff, and at least I need to exercise it once. It may be changed later versions, but previously, a few years ago, it was the case. So I was religiously writing at least one stupid test per each template method.
Right. So I guess, Jack, that's kind of maybe that would be the goal, if we could have one test for each. Now, I can see in a lot of cases that the core of the test could be the same.
Right.
And then it's you know, can we use a common test or a common thing, but just do a different, you know, create the object with the different overload?
Like a factor pattern?
Well, it's kind of like, maybe is it like, can you say create the new with this, but then like say only test these things, right? Because you know, like say the default overloads, the one overload doesn't actually set a finalizer, so don't test that part. And then, you know, you might be able to come up with a way where it's basically, okay, you know, run the test, we tell it which constructor to use, and so it's like if blah blah blah, it uses those, and then there's like, okay, now check the results, and the results can also say, well, okay, based on which constructor I asked it to use, I know to only check these results, because for some of the overloads, you know, the defaults are not going to ask it to do what I would check in the first place.
Yeah, in test you can create so-called parameterized tests. So like instead of using test, you need to write like test underscore p, and there must be a function which should effectively provide variation for each test. So in fact, we need some kind of factory method for each test set of parameters.
Yeah, and I know we already have some tests that are sort of along the lines of like they're driven from JavaScript. So on the JavaScript side, you could actually have an array that kind of tells you like which overload to use and what to check. And then it calls one C method to, with those parameters. And on the C side, it says, okay, I'm going to use this one and I'm going to do these checks, and then it returns. And on the JavaScript side, it just runs through that table of combinations and expects them all to pass.
Mm. Yeah, it's possible. I've seen it done. We have a bunch of tests which test in if some parameters null or not. It's what you're probably referring to.
Yeah, I think, well, there's some like, I think like a good one that would come to mind is probably like there's a method to tell you what the type is. So you can actually like, you can call the same C code and say, here's an object, and then here's what I expect you to tell me. And so like the JavaScript has the code that knows how to match up the different things you've asked it to do and with the expected answer, right? And you could, so you don't have to, I guess what I'm getting at is to avoid having to write like C code, which is unique for every one of the combinations. It's sort of lower overhead to try and drive that from the JavaScript side sometimes.
Right. Less duplication we have is better.
Yeah. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, I'll think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay, so stale issues. Just gonna go down there and see if there's anything to discuss. I guess this one we did discuss, but I think we decided, and I think we pasted an issue on the, okay. Let's see. Yesterday, okay.
I think we discussed it a few weeks ago. I'm not sure if did author responded on a pull request.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see where we. Right. Okay. So maybe I think both of those links are to the. Right. Okay. So yeah, we didn't see, there hasn't been any response on that. I think the answer was we were going to leave it open for a little while. And if there's no response, then maybe one of us would take a look at doing that. So I think after a few weeks, it's probably okay. I forget who it was who said they might take a look at it, but I think we're at the point where we could probably take a look at it ourselves. Okay, but I don't think there's anything more that's still active, and don't think there's anything more to discuss on that, other than like, if I think it might have been Nick who said he'd take a look at it. So since he's away, we'll just leave it on the list. And yeah, what else is there? Sorry.
Yeah, I didn't make progress on my items yet.
Okay, was that?
It was some crash, I believe. Kevin is investigating.
Yeah, I think we just, yeah. Still active. Wait for Kevin to come back. Why am I keep getting all the way out. And then this one is probably the last one, right? Which you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Okay.
Covers.
Yep. Okay. So that takes us to the end of that list. haven't heard of any new modules or anything like that. Oh, yesterday, wait a sec, here we go. Okay, that's quite interesting. So this is another engine. Okay, so this is another JavaScript-like engine that actually runs, that uses Node API as well. So
This seems like a implementation based on the JavaScript and its libTUV version. It's similar to the ILT.js implementation with
okay.
the brief view into the source code.
Okay, no, that's interesting. So that's cool. Let's see anything. Oops. Oh, this is an interesting one too. It's being added to Dino.
It's quite interesting. I believe like Dino wants to have only this small streaming API, and having direct API like Node APIs. Is it part of the strategy?
I think this is probably related to like I mean, there was a blog post announced that they were going to basically support NPM and try and work towards having like most NPM modules just work. So yeah, no, this is very interesting in terms of, I think Bun is putting some pressure on Dino. They implemented Node API to support native add-ons. And so like, as I think always has been the case, like compatibility with be able to run what Node runs is one of the things that, like, if you're trying to compete and you don't have that, it makes your life hard, right? Because people are like, hey, I can't run this, I can't run that. And so, one of the goals from the beginning was that Node API would let you run with different engines behind the scene and let, people do more innovation and whatever. But like, this is another way that surfaces, because like, for example, behind Bun, it's like a totally different JavaScript engine. So if it was tied to V8, you just never could, well, I shouldn't say never, but it would be a lot harder to, I know Jack Record had a shim or something, but.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting news, actually.
Yeah, I see it as like, it's really, yeah, this is, this should really drive if you want to write anything that includes a native module that will run across the different runtimes that are out there, you should use Node API because it may now run on these different engines versus not. So, okay, I glad I didn't skip that, and thanks a lot to Nick who's mentioned those ones. Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
And Bun uses JavaScript core. Understand.
Right. Yeah.
Cool.
So it's actually interesting that like we find out about these after they put them in versus people coming to us and saying, I'm having trouble doing it. If you know what I mean, like I think it's a bit of a validation that the API is relatively implementable, which is good. Okay, yeah, that's quite cool.
I would say it was most, for me, like it was Node API implementation was mostly simple. Probably reference was the most difficult time.
Right. Yeah.
Already gave feedback.
And I do, yeah, we still have those issues. So hopefully we'll make that a little better.
Yeah, I'm very excited about what's change that Chengzhong does about finalizers and stuff. We can fix it. I have a feeling.
I haven't done anything on the debug, but still probably a good reminder. Burning down the list of issues. Any particular issues people have? Okay, there's no pull requests. Any issues people have in mind that we should talk about? Oh, sorry, I should be looking at the right repo here. That's why there's no PRs. Okay, great. Deepak has created a README on how to use the filter. I think that will be great. So if we can take a look at that, get that landed. I can never remember, so I like Doc that can tell me how to do it. We talked about this one. I think we've talked about these ones in the past. So this one I saw there was already a mention. This one is fairly new, but I guess. Okay, so Kevin mentioned that suggested PR. Anything else isn't too new. No, okay. So none of those look to that. Thing is too new. I thought we would be useful, Legindicast, for us to walk us through this one. I don't know if we have enough time or if you're ready, think it's it's a good thing to do.
Yeah, so Redmi has several comments on the PR. I just mentioned that I have some of them I have replied in the thread, so we can continue the discussion on GitHub, and some
Okay.
of them I'll continue to work to fix them.
Okay.
Besides these discussions, this PR is primarily focused on extracting to improve the conditions around to improve the second pass callback, the works around the second pass callback to make it cancelable and simplify the code around this callback. Since now then it's cancelable, we can remove a lot of boilerplate just to keep the data around. So that's a core point of this PR. With that, we can remove a lot of workarounds just to keep the data alive to make the second pass callback works. And it's basically we are just using our own loop, our own queue for the second pass callback, so that we can make the callback cancelable. And yeah, right. I believe it will be.
Like I'm just was trying to think like how to this is an area where like I know I spent like many times trying to recreate very flaky, like issues that were hard to recreate. So like, running, I don't know, hundreds of hours of CPU time to see if I could recreate issues and try and figure out like how to work around them. So I just want to be I want to be really careful that I try and understand best that I can what we're changing versus what we're not changing, and was trying to see if maybe you taking us a walk through would help make me be able to do it sooner than later, is kind of, I guess, where I was going towards.
Yeah, I was thinking that I can list all the possible code paths for the finalizers, so that we can understand what cases we have been fixing around this finalizer part previously, so that we can have an overview what the problem, what the problems we can fix with this PR. So
that sounds really good, like a table of the combinations.
Yeah. So I have a list in the document describing the possible use cases, and I'll post in the chat in case you need to find it.
Yeah. Okay. I'm looking
the link of the document. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's under the type hierarchies, we currently have four cases on how to delete the finalizers.
Right.
So it's basically about if the first three cases, it's just about the user need to delete the reference, and the last case is about that the reference data structure is owned by node implementation, and the node implementation node core should delete the reference once the finalizer is invoked, which is used in, like, say, node API instance data.
So is that right? Those things, like, is it the delete method is called by the user?
Right.
Okay, so okay. Right. So basically it's enqueued. So we enqueue the finalizer, but then, and everything just happens through a regular path unless somebody calls delete at some point, right?
Yeah, right. So we can make sure we correctly remove all the pending callbacks from the queue, and make sure the finalizer will not be called again after the delete has been called.
Right.
So that's how this PR can make sure we can cover all the cases we have been encountered before.
Yep. Okay, yeah, no, that's a good idea. So and then look at the PR in the context of, okay, this case, how does it flow? Yeah, before and after, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So do you think this list is complete now, or?
Currently, yes. I have walked through the previous issues, and I believe these are the cases we have been facing before.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, so okay, that's helpful. I'll try and next week take another look and look at it like on a particular case and see See if that helps me sort of work through it without it taking a long time.
Yeah, that would be great.
Any other questions or stuff? We're pretty much at time. Other things we should talk about?
Yeah, I don't have anything else.
Okay, if not, then well, thanks for everybody taking the time, and look forward to seeing you in GitHub and talking to you next time. Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.